I want to start with a premise that might sound, a little controversial,
Hmm.
especially if you've ever been on the wrong end of a breakup.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about infidelity, particularly in these huge classic novels, the conversation almost always lands on morality. It becomes a judgment game.
Right. Who's the villain? Who's
Yeah,
the victim?
exactly. Who lied, who sneaked around. But the research we're getting into today suggests that if we just stop at cheating as bad, we're we're really missing the entire point of why these stories still hit so hard.
Well, the way our sources put it is it's the difference between reading a tabloid and a really deep psychological case study. If you just look at the actions, sure, it's a scandal.
Of course.
But the sources we're analyzing and we're focusing on Gustave Flaubert's Madame Bovary and Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, they argue that you have to look at the why before you even touch the what.
Yes. And not the superficial why, not he was handsome or...
He's bored.
Right. We're looking at what our sources call an existential protest, which, that's a heavy term. It implies that for Emma Bovary and for Anna Karenina betraying their husbands, it wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was a desperate scream to prove they were actually alive.
That is the core thesis. And it's funny, we often group these two women together because on the surface, the file looks the same.
It does.
You've got the 19th century setting married to these stable, but let's face it, unexciting men. They have these huge high-stakes affairs, and ultimately they both face these tragic, self-inflicted deaths. But if you peel back the layers, like our source material does, you find their motivations, the actual DNA of their betrayal, are from almost separate species.
So let's break this down. We've got the dreamer in Emma and the prisoner in Anna. I think we should start with Emma Bovary. Most people remember her as the woman who just, shopped too much and slept around. But the analysis here paints a much sadder picture.
Well, it's less of a simple delusion and more of a consumption disorder, you could say. Specifically with media, Emma didn't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to destroy my marriage to Charles Bovary.
No.
She woke up every day realizing that her life looked nothing like the books she devoured back in the convent.
That convent detail is so key. You'd think a religious upbringing would make her more pious, but the sources point out she wasn't into the theology at all. She was into the aesthetic.
Precisely. She loved the incense, the velvet, the swelling music, the whole idea of the suffering saint. She consumed religion the same way she later consumed romantic novels.
She wanted the feeling of it.
She wanted the sensation of holiness, just like she later wanted the sensation of passionate love. The source material even points to the term Bovarism, which was literally coined because of her psychology. It's this inability to see the world as it is and only see it as you wish it were.
That feels incredibly modern. It's the whole Instagram versus reality problem just with 19th century French novels. She's trying to curate a vibe, and when her actual life doesn't match that vibe, she just breaks.
And that's where Charles Bovary comes in. See, the tragedy of Charles is not that he's a bad guy. He's a doctor, he's kind, he absolutely adores her, but he is painfully, aggressively ordinary.
The text mentions she wanted a husband who was exceptional or amazing, and she got a guy who, well, he eats his dinner, he goes to sleep, and he loves her in this very quiet, unremarkable way.
And for Emma, that silence is deafening. She's expecting a story, a stormy narrative with a big crescendo, and when all she gets is daily monotony, she feels cheated.
Swindled.
The source makes a really crucial distinction here. Emma isn't actually looking for a person to love. She's looking for a mirror. She wants a lover who makes her feel like the heroine she's read about.
So when she gets into these affairs, first with Rodolphe, then Leon, she's basically just casting actors for a play she's writing in her head.
Yes, and that is exactly why they are doomed. Rodolphe is a cad, a wealthy landowner who just sees her as another conquest. But Emma projects this whole knight in shining armor thing onto him.
And there's this heartbreaking cycle.
A terrible cycle. She achieves the affair, she gets the secret letters and the stolen moments, and for a few weeks she feels that rush. She thinks, finally the movie has started.
But then that new car smell wears off.
It always does. The novelty fades, the lover becomes familiar, Rodolphe becomes just some guy with dirty boots, Leon becomes a nervous clerk, and because she's chasing a sensation, not a human connection, the second that sensation drops, she spirals. The source argues she's hunting a mirage.
She thinks the solution is a new man, but the problem is her refusal to engage with reality itself. It's a harsh take.
It is. She's trying to buy a personality with credit she doesn't have, literally and metaphorically.
Okay, let's pivot to the other side of this. Anna Karenina. If Emma is running toward a fantasy, the sources describe Anna as running away from suffocation.
The entire temperature is different. Emma is a provincial doctor's wife with a head full of Frankly, bad poetry. Anna is a sophisticated aristocrat in St. Petersburg. She knows how society works, she's not naive, and her husband, Karenin, isn't just ordinary like Charles.
The way the sources describe Karenin it's chilling. He's not abusive in the way we think of it, but he's described as mechanical.
He's a functionary of the state. He operates by rules, by hours, by public perception. The source material describes their marriage as legal rather than living. There's no blood in it. It's a contract.
So when Anna meets Vronsky, it's not because she's looking for a storybook hero.
No, it's not a whim.
It sounds visceral. The sources call it a spark of life, almost biological.
It is, and that is the existential protest. Anna has been slowly, quietly suffocating under the weight of this cold, official life. Meeting Vronsky is like taking a gasp of air after being held underwater. She feels seen. She feels alive.
And the source really emphasizes that her love is sweeping and honest. She's not play acting.
Not at all. In fact, she's terrified of it. She actually tries to fight it off.
That's a massive difference from Emma, who's out there practically looking for trouble. Anna seems to realize from the start that this feeling of aliveness is incredibly dangerous.
She knows the cost. You have to remember, she's a mother. She has an incredibly high social standing. Emma risks her reputation in a small town. Anna is risking her entire identity in the eyes of an empire. When she chooses Vronsky, she isn't chasing a whim. She's making a definitive statement. I cannot exist without love.
If Emma is chasing a dream, Anna is escaping a grave.
But this brings up a really interesting point about how we, the readers, see them. And this ties into the lens of the author part of our research. I've always felt that Flaubert, the author of Madame Bovary, he kind of hates her, or at least he enjoys humiliating her.
That's a very common and I think a valid reading. The source describes Flaubert's style as analytical coldness. He puts Emma under a microscope, he dissects her.
Flaubert despised the bourgeoisie, the middle class. And to him, Emma is the ultimate consumer. She consumes goods, she consumes people, she consumes emotions, all just to fill this void inside her.
So he's using her to make a point, showing us the tragedy of what happens when you take these mediocre dime store illusions seriously.
Yeah.
It's almost a dark comedy at times, watching her try so hard and fail so miserably.
Exactly. We're watching her struggle like a specimen in a jar. But Tolstoy is completely different. He brings what the source calls a humanistic flood. He doesn't just watch Anna, he inhabits her.
You feel that when you read it. I mean, even when Anna is being irrational or jealous, you don't roll your eyes the way you do with Emma. You feel her panic.
Tolstoy forces you to feel the texture of her isolation. He lets her be complex and brilliant and flawed all at the same time. And what's fascinating is that Tolstoy himself was a moralist who believed adultery was a sin.
But he couldn't help himself.
His empathy for his character completely overrides his judgment. He shows us that her sin was a desperate attempt to survive in a soul-crushing environment.
Which leads us right to that environment. I mean, we can't talk about these women without talking about the social prison. It's easy to just say the 19th century was sexist, but our sources go deeper. They talk about the threat these women posed.
Yeah, you have to look at the social structures. In bourgeois France and aristocratic Russia, the family unit wasn't just about love and happiness. It was the economic and moral brick holding up the entire wall of society.
Right, so if a man cheats, it's just, what, taking a break?
Essentially, yeah. The sources highlight this massive gender gap. A man could have a mistress. As long as he was discreet, paid his bills, showed up for dinner, he was still respectable. In some circles, it was almost a status symbol.
But if the woman steps out of line,
It's seen as an act of anarchy. If the woman, who is the keeper of the family name, the reputation, the home, if she betrays the marriage, the whole system feels threatened. For Emma, it was a double crime. She betrayed her husband, yes, but she was also trying to live above her social station.
spending money she didn't have.
To live a life she wasn't born into, that's a crime against the class structure itself.
And Anna was already at the top of the social ladder.
Which just made her fall that much harder. For Anna, choosing her own individual happiness over her social honor was the ultimate transgression. She put the self before the system, and the system does not forgive that. The source notes she wasn't just shunned, she was erased. People she'd known her whole life would literally cross the street to avoid making eye contact with her.
And that isolation is what drives the final act for both of them. The outline calls it the narrower prison. And it's such a tragic paradox, isn't it? They both stepped out of their marriages looking for a wider life, more freedom, more passion. But in the end, their world just got smaller and smaller.
That's the devastating irony of it all. I mean, look at Emma. She wanted this world of luxury and sweeping romance. But where does she end up?
in a corner. The lovers abandon her because she's too much, she's too intense, she's trying to make real life match her fantasy, and the men just can't handle it. And then the financial reality comes crashing down. That scene where she's begging for money to avoid public ruin, it's not romantic. It is gritty and awful.
It's void, debts, and gradual collapse. Her world shrinks until the only door left open is the one to the apothecary's poison cabinet. She takes the arsenic not as some grand or romantic gesture, but because there is literally nowhere else for her to go. The fantasy has evaporated, and reality is unbearable.
And Anna's world shrinks too, but in a much more psychological way.
Yes. Because society completely casts her out, Vronsky becomes her entire world. He's her lover, her friend, her family, her only link to humanity. And that is far too much weight for any one person to carry.
That's when the paranoia kicks in. She becomes obsessed with the idea that he's falling out of love with her.
She finds herself in a suffocating isolation. She starts projecting her own guilt and her own insecurity onto him. She becomes jealous, controlling. She escaped the ice of her marriage only to find herself burning up with anxiety. That final scene at the train station. It isn't just about lost love. It's about the sheer exhaustion of fighting a war against society by herself every single day. She just wants the noise in her head to stop.
It really makes you rethink the whole concept of freedom in these books. They sought it, and what they found was, well, death.
They found that society offered no space for their mistakes. A man could stumble and get back up, but these women were required to be perfect pillars of virtue. One crack, and the whole building comes down right on top of you.
So bringing this all together, why do we still obsess over Emma and Anna? Why does the source material argue this is about so much more than just don't cheat?
Because it asks a question that is still, I think, terrifyingly relevant today.
Which is?
To what extent can a human being demand a life that actually resembles them?
That's the existential protest.
That's it, exactly. Both women looked at the life that was assigned to them, the good marriage, the stable home, the societal approval, and they both said, this is not me. This does not fit the shape of my soul.
But the cost of rejecting that assigned life was everything they had.
The source material leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. Is it possible to be fully, authentically yourself without paying for it with your entire existence? For Emma and Anna, the answer was no. The friction between their internal desire and the external laws of their world was just too great. They were crushed right in the middle.
A tragedy of the spirit. It's not just about who slept with whom. It's about the human need to be recognized, to be seen for who you are, and the walls we all hit when we try to break out of the boxes we're put in.
And that, I think, is why, despite all the scandal, despite the judgment,
Right.
we still weep for them. We see a little piece of our own desire for more reflected in their downfall.
A deep dive into the true cost of desire. It's heavy stuff, but definitely necessary. Thank you for walking us through the wreckage today.
It was a pleasure to unpack it.
And thanks to you for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.